Good morning. It is good to be together in all of the ways we are together. Good morning to the 20 or so households who are with us on Zoom today. Good morning to all of you here in the Commons. This is our first Sunday where we're not requiring masks on Sunday mornings. And of course, some of us are still wearing them. And so this feels like a new stage in this ongoing journey that is almost 3 years long. I remember on Friday, the 13th of March of 2020, we thought, oh, we'll close the church for 2 weeks and that should be fine. And we have had to learn so many things since then, all of us together and individually. We have been able to rely on the generosity of so many people. Our AV system was upgraded before the pandemic started by church member Dave Curl, who was a professor of AV things at Western and gave us a top of the line system when we didn't even know we needed to be able to live stream from the Commons. Who knew that having a team of medical professionals and a retired facilities manager from a local college who knew about ventilation would be the people that we needed to step forward in this moment. We've had so many people think creatively and flexibly and keep pivoting and pivoting and pivoting. So we're just almost turning in circles sometimes. And none of that is over, unfortunately. I wish we could put a period at the end of this sentence and it's a comma or a semicolon or something like that. Because we're continuing to live in this pandemic and we will be for a long time. And we will continue to keep trusting science, keep looking to one another, keep finding wisdom within ourselves, trusting experts, trusting science as we figure out how to be community again and again and again. So come, let us gather. Come, let us worship together.
Good sunshiny morning. My name is Donna McClurkin, and I'm here as a member of the Sunday Services Committee. Whether you're here in the Commons, on Zoom, or watching later on YouTube, welcome to People's Church. A special welcome is extended to newcomers and visitors. We gather here to learn from and with each other about being in relationship, what it means to be human, what it means to be Unitarian Universalists. Sometimes, like today, we wrestle together with hard, complicated things. Let us move into worship, authentic and curious with compassion, open to connection in all its forms.
As we begin, I have a few announcements. Today, after the service, we have the next in our Inquirer series of classes for newcomers. This week, it's focused on the social justice programs of our church. So if that's something you want to learn more about, whether you're new, whether you've been here for a while, I encourage you to gather in room 19, which is the big room near the top of the stairs. At about 12:30, there'll be a light lunch and there is childcare. Next, our silent auction is live. So those of you who are online can see the online catalog. It was linked in our church newsletter, and you can make bids by contacting the church office. Those of you here in person, you can walk down the hallway on this side of the Commons and you will see the bid sheets. So write your name down a bunch of times today. This will be live for 3 Sundays. And we know that the first Sunday that this is live, a few people always say, but I have something, and that's great. Be in contact with Melissa, our church administrator, or fill out the online form and your items will be posted. There are some real treasures. My favorite is that we have a master gardener offering to help you plan your garden, and then someone else is offering to plant your garden. So you can, it's like if you buy both of those things, you'll just have your whole spring garden completely set. Isn't that a great idea? I also want to let you know about our service next week. 2 church members, Garen Young and Josh Holcomb, will be presenting Rhythm and Melody, a mythosomatic exploration of music. It's going to be very good. I have seen bits of this as it comes together. Please come. And at the risk of a little bit of chaos, I invite you, if you're here in person, to take a moment to introduce yourself to the people who are nearby. If you're on Zoom, maybe share a wave or type a hello in the chat box. Melissa, has our person come? I did not see that. Whatever.
I invite you to continue these conversations after the service. At this time, I invite you to rise, embody your spirit, and sing along with Bob and I. There's 2 parts of the song. Bob's going to be leading the low part, and I'm going to be leading the high part.
Now let us
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Now let us
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your voice.
Be not afraid.
Be not
Now let
afraid.
us
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Now let us
Sing to the power of the hope within.
Now let us
Sing to the power of the hope within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your voice.
Be not afraid.
Be not afraid. Sing to the power of the hope within.
Now let us
Sing to the power of the love within.
Now let us
Sing to the power of the love within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your voice.
Be not afraid.
Be not afraid. Sing to the power of the love within.
Now let us
Sing to the power of the joy within.
Now let us
Sing to the power of the joy within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your voice.
Be not afraid.
Be not afraid. Sing to the power of the joy within. Thank you. I'd like to invite Io May Alder Holcomb up to light our chalice. And as a reminder, if you're lighting a chalice at home, we encourage you to type in the chat box, "A chalice is lit," and your neighborhood, street, city, whatever. Our Our words today are by Eric Walker Wickstrom, so that we might together shine. When we light our chalice, everyone focuses on the flame, yet it is the paraffin of the candle, the cotton of the wick, the potassium chlorate and sulfur of the match, and the oxygen in the air around us that makes the flame possible. As leaders, we are not called to be a lone beacon on a hill. Rather, we are meant to work together so that we might together shine.
In addition to our chalice here at People's Church, we have a chalice lit this morning in Kalamazoo Township, in Millwood, a heart chalice in London, Galesburg, Munson Lake near Grand Junction, Timberleaf Lane, and in West Main Hill, on Highland View, in Martin, in Portage. I think that's all of them. My goodness. It is such a joy to have so many chalices burning this morning. People's Church is a community that supports one another in good times and hard times. One of the ways we do this is when we gather together, we invite people to share the joys and sorrows and milestones of their lives. And it has been a while since we've done this with all generations together. So if you have a joy or sorrow that you want to share, if you're on Zoom, I invite you to type it into our chat box. If you are here in person, I invite you to come forward, place a stone in our bowl of water, and speak briefly into the microphone. Be sure to share your name, or you can just place a stone in the water. Children off to their specialty classes. They're going to get to do outdoor games and sewing and Chinese New Year and altered books today. So children, you are all supposed to gather in room 9, which is the room back here with the Buddha in it. And you will get sorted from there and let the rest of us sing. Oh, and there's K1 Owl for the kindergarten first graders as well. They don't get to do the fun, they get to learn important things.
Go forth in peace in search of wisdom, with love to guide you on your way, and may the joy of life surround you wherever you may go. Go forth in peace in search of wisdom, with love to guide you on your way, and may the joy of life surround you wherever you may go.
People's people are generous people. And once a month, we send our offering out beyond us to do good and important work in our community. Today, our special offering is to benefit the Legacy House of Outfront Kalamazoo. And the person who was supposed to come and talk to us had something come up, I believe, unless they snuck in the back. I'm not seeing any gestures. Okay. And so I'm going to do my best to tell you about this amazing program. So the Legacy House is transitional housing for young adults who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, who don't have another place to live, who would otherwise be homeless, many of whom are coming out of homelessness into housing through this program. We know that being queer increases a child or young adult's risk of homelessness significantly. And we know, unfortunately, as a church, that often religion plays a role in that. People are kicked out of their homes when they come out, or thrown out, or run away because their home is no longer safe because of their identity. And so many young adults rely on parents and family to establish their lives in the world, whether that's helping with tuition or rent, or just being the resource you need to figure out how to adult in the world. Because nobody teaches you all the things you need to know by the time you're 18. And so to have a supportive community to help you launch yourself into a more sustainable adulthood is very important. And so I think it's incredibly important for us as a church to send money to this important effort, to say that we think everyone is holy and worthy of care. And we know that our friends at Outfront, the LGBTQ Community Resource Center, have been receiving a lot of hatred recently. Some of this is publicity related to the rainbow ice game at the hockey stadium, where they turned the ice rainbow and said hockey is for all. And apparently people couldn't handle that and directed a tremendous amount of hatred and threats at Outfront for that. And money doesn't fix every problem, but it helps, right? And so this is the moment where I invite you to be as generous as you can be to support the good and important work of the Legacy House and Outfront Kalamazoo today. The offering will now be received, and the giant QR code is on your screen now.
Please join me in giving thanks for all that sustains us. From the countless gifts we each have been given, gifts of life and love and sustenance, we bring these small portions to share in the works of love, which none of us can accomplish alone.
I invite you to still your body and your mind for a few moments of meditation. Communion circle. The earth. One planet. Round, global. So that when you trace its shape with your finger, you end up where you started. It's one. It's whole. All the dotted lines we draw on our maps of this globe are just that, dotted lines. They smear easily. Oceans can be crossed. Even the desert can be crossed. The grain that grows on one side of the border tastes just as good as the grain on the other side. Moreover, bread made from rice is just as nourishing to body and spirit as bread made from corn or spelt or teff or wheat or barley. There is no superior land, no chosen site, no divine destiny falling on any one nation who draws those dotted lines just so. There is only one earth we all share. We, the living, with all else that lives and does not live. Everything. Everything, for good or ill, is part of this shared whole. Sky, earth, song, words, and now this silence.
As we come out of this moment of silence, I invite you to join me in song from your seats. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
Our first reading today is by Dawn Star Saras Borchelt. Dawn Star is a third-generation Unitarian Universalist, currently serving as the Director of Lifespan Religious Education at the Mainline Unitarian Church in Devon, Pennsylvania. Tangled. Knit 6, purl 6 sets of 2 rows, 4 rows, 6 rows, up to 12 patterns, repeating, steady, soothingly the same. This is not what life is like. Life is like picking up a tousled hunk of yarn pulled out of the basket by an impatient child looking for a string too many times. You find an end, you follow the thread for a while, and sooner or later you hit a tangle, knots and twists and loops all mixed up together. Sometimes I sit there and untangle it, pulling little by little until I have one piece stretched out and can go on to the next one. Sometimes I grab a pair of scissors and cut. Enough. I only need a little anyway. But sometimes I hold the tangle in my hand, amazed for a moment at the complexity, the mess. I look at it and think, this can't be solved. It just is. There are patterns, connections, confusing ones, frustrating ones, the thread turning back on itself as life also does. The tangled things will always be here. In this moment I'm living through, right now, whatever comes after. Even if I work through this, even if I cut the cord and walk away, look at the tangled knots in the yarn. Look at how it hurts.
German-American theologian Reinhold Niebuhr was the author of the Serenity Prayer and one of the most important ethicists of the 20th century. Before that, he was the pastor at Bethel Evangelical Church in Detroit, a German-speaking congregation. He kept a journal of that time. Here is an entry he wrote in 1925. We went through one of the big automobile factories today. So artificial is life that these factories are like a strange world to me, though I have lived close to them for many years. The foundry interested me in particular. The heat was terrific. The men seemed weary. Here, manual labor is drudgery. The workers sweat and their dull pain are part of the price paid for the fine cars we all run. And most of us run the cars without knowing what price is being paid for them. We are all responsible. We all want the things which the factory produces, and none of us is sensitive enough to care how much in human values the efficiency of the modern factory costs. We maintain our pride and self-respect and our sense of importance only through a vast and inclusive ignorance. If we knew the world in which we live a little better, we would perish in shame or be overcome by a sense of futility. This next reading is a poem by Fadi Judah. Fadi Judah is a contemporary Palestinian American physician, poet, and translator. He was born in Texas and raised in Libya and Saudi Arabia. He lives in Houston, where he practices internal medicine. Mimesis. My daughter wouldn't hurt a spider that had nested between her bicycle handles. For 2 weeks, she waited until it left of its own accord. If you tear down the web, I said, it will simply know this isn't a place to call home, and you'd get to go biking. She said, that's how others become refugees, isn't it?
I invite you to rise and body your spirit to sing together. Our world is one world. What touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes with love or hate we make, a bridge or wall. Our world is one world. Its ways of wealth affect us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all, where fear and greed make many holes, but where our hearts can hear a different call.
Years ago, I worked in a shoe store, and twice a week we would receive a shipment of shoes to restock our inventory. On those days, I would spend hours sorting and organizing the shoe boxes and removing the paper and plastic that is put inside shoes to help them hold their shape after they're manufactured. And one day I was removing the beige crumbled up paper from the toe of a white running shoe. And as I pulled it out, a single black hair about this long came out with it. And it brought me up short because, of course, I knew in my head that the shoes in my store were made by people, some far off somewhere people, but I didn't know it in my heart or really incorporate that knowledge into my body in any sort of way, and was surprised by the reminder of the humanity of the person who placed that beige crumpled up paper in the toe of the shoe. Seeing and touching that hair made that distant person real to me. The hair was once on someone's head, someone who helped make the shoe that then I was going to sell, someone with long hair like mine, someone with hair and hands and a heart, a real person, not an abstraction. And I stared at that hair for a few minutes, trying to imagine who that person must be. And then I tucked it in my pocket. And I meant to take it out later and, I don't know, do some sort of ritual of remembrance or something. But I forgot, and it ended up in a lint screen of my washing machine or in a vacuum or who knows where. And I thought about that hair and that moment of realizing that there are humans behind all of our things when I was listening to a podcast about the history of sweetness in food. It is a brutal history, as many of us know. The production of sugar especially has been the cause of so much suffering. Beginning in the 1700s, sugar became an internationally traded commodity. Slavery, genocide against indigenous people in the Americas, and environmental destruction are all a direct result of sugar production, of the quest for profit, of the desire for sweetness. And yet people, mostly white people in Europe and North America, craved that sweetness. And the host of that podcast, Throughline from NPR, asked a question that gave this sermon its title. He asked, what level of brutality and exploitation will we accept as a society in order to get the things we want but do not need? How much brutality can we bear? It is easy to judge the sugar eaters of the 18th and 19th century. Didn't they know that enslaved people made their sugar? Didn't they know that sugar production was some of the most brutal work there was, people losing their lives and limbs over and over and over again? How could they eat their jam or sweeten their tea or coffee in good conscience when the ecosystems of entire Caribbean islands were destroyed for sugar cultivation? There were some sugar boycotts. Some abolitionists and others refused to purchase sugar and cotton and other products produced by enslaved people. But that was rare. And those kind of boycotts are rare now too. It doesn't take much effort to find evidence of brutal treatment of humans and the earth for us to get the things we like. Donna read earlier about a minister visiting a Ford factory in 1925 and being shocked by the conditions. Workers' sweat and their dull pain are part of the price paid for the fine cars we all run. Little has changed since Reinhold Niebuhr wrote those words. This week, a new book was released that described how much of the cobalt used to produce the rechargeable batteries that are in our cell phones and that make our electric vehicles sustainable, we think, is mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo in conditions described as modern-day slavery. The author talks about how we need the blood of the Congolese to live our lives now. And we know the list can go on, right? We know that child labor is used to produce a lot of the chocolate we eat, that most of the fruits and vegetables found in our grocery store come with an unseen side of brutality, exploitation, often of undocumented folks, and the overuse of water and fertilizers in ways that harm our environment. So many of our clothes and shoes are produced in ways that would break our hearts if we knew all the details. As we were planning our music for this service, Jennifer Drake, our usual pianist, said, I try not to ever buy shoes. And I know I can't not buy shoes, but I don't know how to buy shoes. And that's the reality, right? How do we do this? We live in this interdependent world. And interdependence isn't only a theological claim, though it is among our Unitarian Universalist principles and values. It is science. It is a reality. We are connected to all of the other beings on this planet, and our bodies are made of atoms forged in distant stars. The experience of the COVID pandemic in recent years has taught us how a virus's cross-species mutation can lead to millions of deaths and disrupt our lives. We are connected. It is not a choice, it just is. We are wrapped together in a complicated tangle. And it's good to remember this with awe every once in a while. As one of our poets reminds us, but sometimes I hold the tangle in my hand, amazed for a moment at the complexity, the mess. I look and think, this can't be solved. It just is. And sometimes the tangle is a tangle of brutality and exploitation. The Industrial Revolution, capitalism, and now our global capitalist system has woven these connections even closer. There was a time when most of what we consumed would be produced locally. Shoes from a cobbler, clothes from a tailor, or sewn at home from fabric produced nearby, food grown nearby with very limited access to anything that requires a different climate or is out of season. Construction materials are what can be found within a short distance. And I'm not idealizing that, but when a supply chain is local, there is no far off unseen brutality because there's no far off. You know who's being hurt because they are your neighbor. The television show The Good Place illustrates this well. The Good Place is a sitcom about an afterlife, and it raises so many interesting theological and philosophical questions. There's a point system to determine who goes to the good place, which is a bit like heaven, or the bad place, which is like hell. And every action you take in your life is given a point value, positive or negative. At the end of your life, your points are added up, and if you achieve a high enough score, you get to spend eternity in the good place. If not, you go to the bad place. And in one episode, our heroes discover that no one is going to the good place anymore. They think that the leaders of the bad place must be cheating somehow. So they look through the records and discover this. So now I invite you to pretend that I am Ted Danson reciting this. I tried to get the actual clip, but NBC didn't get back to me in time. So Ted Danson says, in 1534, Douglas Weininger of Hawkhurst, England, gave his grandmother roses for her birthday. He picked them himself, walked them over to her. She was happy. Boom, 145 points. In 2009, Doug Ewing of Skaggsville, Maryland, also gave his grandmother a dozen roses, but he lost 4 points. Why? Because he ordered roses using a cell phone that was made in a sweatshop. The flowers were grown with toxic pesticides, picked by exploited migrant workers, delivered from thousands of miles away, which created a massive carbon footprint. And his money went to a billionaire racist CEO who sends his female employees pictures of his genitals. He continues, Ted Danson continues, don't you understand? The bad place isn't tampering with the points. They don't have to, because every day the world gets a little more complicated and being a good person gets a little harder. Gather the others. We have a lot to do. So every day, the world gets a little more complicated, and being a good person gets a little harder. Gather the others. We have a lot to do. And what shall we do? I wish I had, the 4-point plan that I could just hand you and we could do it and everything would be fixed. I don't think that exists. But I do know that the only good thing about a problem as complicated and awful as the brutality and degradation and exploitation that is our global capitalist system is that there are so many ways to make things a little bit better, a little less brutal. First, a caution. It is very easy to not see what's going on, but we can't numb out or seek only our own purity. It's easy to seek only our own purity in this work. So years ago, when I learned more about the brutal conditions for farm workers who produced apples in my home state of Washington, I stopped eating apples. I ate other fruit instead. Did that help anything beyond my own sense of purity? It really didn't. I wasn't part of some organized effort. I didn't do right to the apple board. I didn't do anything. But I was able to feel like I wasn't participating in a specific brutality that I had knowledge of. But I didn't do any work to see if the bananas or oranges or blueberries I ate instead were produced any more humanely. Boycotts can be an incredibly powerful tool to create change, but they work as mass organized movements, not as individuals. I didn't help anyone. I just got to feel better about myself. Most of us don't live lives where we can entirely opt out of global capitalism. So how do we lessen the amount of brutality? We remember that this is a systemic issue. There are tremendous amounts of money to be made by keeping us uninformed about this part of our interdependence. The shoe store could have easily included a picture of the person whose hair I found and their working conditions on the shoebox or on a big poster in the store saying, "This is who made your shoes today." But they didn't. The leaders of that chain of shoe stores knew that giving us that information would not help them sell shoes. Supply chains for shoes and everything else are intentionally obscure. It takes research to know the full story and impact behind our choices. And none of us have that time. I can't imagine trying to do your grocery shopping, looking up every single item on the list. It's just not a world we can live in. This is a systemic failing, and systemic failings are rarely fixed by individual action. A friend of mine likes to remind me that there is no morally pure choice under capitalism. We exist in systems based on exploitation and brutality. It is so hard to make choices that don't cause some pain somewhere. And they remind me of that the perfection is impossible. There's no such thing as moral purity in this world because it is strangely liberating, right? We can't be perfect at this. I think there is literally no way to exist in this world and live a somewhat normal life without causing pain to someone somewhere in some far distant thing because you bought something, right? But we can do the best we can without measuring ourselves against an impossible and unreachable standard. And do what we can, we must. Because our actions do matter. Our empathy toward far off beings matter. Choosing empathy over indifference is important. In her excellent book, The Empathy Exams, Leslie Jamison writes, empathy isn't just something that happens to us, a meteor shower of synapses in the brain. It's also a choice we make. to pay attention, to extend ourselves. It's made of exertion, that dowdier cousin of impulse. Sometimes we care for another because we know we should or because it's asked for, but this doesn't make our caring hollow. The act of choosing simply means we've committed ourselves to a set of behaviors greater than the sum of our individual inclinations. This confession of effort chafes against the notion that empathy should always rise unbidden, that genuine means the same thing as unwilled, that intentionality is the enemy of love. She continues, but I believe in intention and I believe in work. I believe of waking up in the middle of the night and packing our bags and leaving our worst selves for our better ones. So I often say that it is our work to love the part of the world that we can reach. And that kind of breaks down when it comes to this question, doesn't it? We found its limits. It is harder to help the person who makes my shoes across an ocean, who I will likely never know, than it is to help my immediate neighbor. And yet we are connected and interdependent and responsible for one another. I think the key to this work is harm reduction. So harm reduction is a public health concept that recognizes that behaviors like drug use are part of our world, and there are things we can do to minimize their negative effects. So with regard to illicit drug use, that's needle exchanges that can keep users of injectable drugs from contracting HIV, that's teaching people throughout a community to carry and administer naloxone, which can keep people who have overdosed on opioids alive. It doesn't solve addiction, right? But it shows care to people living with addiction and keeps them and others safer. So approach from the perspective of harm reduction, there are so many possibilities for action to lessen the exploitation and brutality in our world. We buy fair trade when we can, we buy local when we can, we buy used when we can. We take care of what we have so they last longer. We participate in gifting economies like local buy nothing groups, or close to gifting economies like the church's white elephant sale to find new homes for things with use left in them that we no longer need. So whatever exploitation and brutality went into their production is brought a little more into balance if they are used until they are out of usefulness. We remember that when something is way too cheap, someone is probably being exploited or an ecosystem is being hurt. And we remember that something being expensive is no guarantee against any of that. We participate in boycotts and other collective actions at Reform. If we have power in organizations, we work to shift their practices. We move through the world with awareness. We make choices aligned with our values. We forgive ourselves when we fall short, knowing that we will fall short again and again and again and again. And then we do our best. So I know many of you are already engaging in many of these strategies. Let's continue the work. Let's try some new approaches for these to reduce the harm, to reduce the brutality in this beautiful world, our blue boat home. Is this enough? Probably not. This won't erase all of the brutality and exploitation from our world. One person who isn't a president or a billionaire doesn't have that kind of power. But our choices, our habits, our ways of being in the world, when multiplied by everyone else with care and concern and trying to do the right thing, does add up to something. Adds up to a world that is at least a little bit less exploitative, a little bit less brutal. And even if it is not perfect, it is worthwhile. So as Ted Danson tells his team on The Good Place, because every day the world gets a little more complicated and being a good person gets a little harder. Gather the others. We have a lot to do. May we do what we can to make this world a little less brutal and a lot more beautiful. May it be so. May we make it so. And amen.
Please rise and bow to your spirit. We're going to sing Blue Boat Home. Standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor nor port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea. Questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the light of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. To the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite seas before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor nor port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Oh, the wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home, my blue boat home, my blue boat home.
Yes. Yes. I was worried about how people would leave feeling good, and I think you fixed that. Thank you. Every day, the world gets a little more complicated and being a good person gets a little harder. Gather the others. We have a lot to do. Let us go in peace and go in love.